While writing valid semantic HTML is important, making sure that your content is accessible to everyone is just as important. Thankfully, those two things go hand in hand. So let's take a look at a few things that you can do to ensure that the links on your sites are accessible. To do that, I've opened up the accessible.html file, which is found in the 01_02 directory. And the first thing I'm going to do is open this page up in a browser, because not only does it serve as our exercise files, but it also has all the talking points that we're going to be using as we go through this exercise. Now, the first thing I want to talk about are these skip navigation links. These have been around for a very, very long time, and there's a lot of sites out there that use these, but they've sort of become one of those things that people just sort of assume you know. So people just don't even cover skip navigation, and sometimes people don't find out about them until much later on down the line. Well, essentially, the tops of most pages are taken up with a lot of navigation, especially for complicated sites where you might have a lot of drop-down menus. You might be looking at dozens of links at the top of the page before somebody actually gets to the content. For sighted users, that's not a big deal. You've got your drop-down menus. You can choose to ignore them if you want. You can scroll right down to the content. But for people using a screen reader, they are a big deal. Imagine having to sit through and listen to every single one of the links in your navigation before you can even start to get to the content. So essentially what a skip navigation link is, it's a small link at the very top of the page that usually just sort of jumps down to the main content or someplace else on the page that you want to redirect the user if they're skipping over the navigation. In most cases, designers will use CSS to hide these skip navigation links, and so they're only visible to screen readers. Some other websites will make them visible, but only on a hover or something like that. So you've got a lot of flexibility when using these skip navigation links. So I'm going to switch back over to the code, and we're just going to create one really quickly to show you guys how easy these are. So no, we don't have a huge menu at the top of the page here, but let's just say we don't want to make users have to listen to each one of these links every single time out. Well, right after this heading right here, this making links accessible, I'm going to go ahead and create a new anchor tag. And this one, I'm just going to use a fragment identifier. I'm going to say href and then pound content. Now what that's going to do is it's going to link on the page to any element that has the ID of content. So that's what's just going to sort of jump, or if you will, skip over the navigation. Next thing I'm going to do is go ahead and give it a title. Now we're going to talk more about the title attribute in just a moment, but I'm just going to say skip to content, so it's a little informative there. And then inside the anchor element, I'm going to type in skip to content. Now this is important. I've seen a lot of designers out there do these skip navigation links that don't have any content in them whatsoever. And they assume, well, since I'm going to hide it with CSS, I'll just go ahead and create an empty anchor element. The problem with that is that most screen readers out there will ignore empty elements, so you don't want to do that. All right, so if I go back to the browser and refresh that, now I can see I have the skip to content link. When I click that, nothing happens. And the reason nothing happens is because it's sort of a two-part process. We have to have an element on the page with this ID. So I'm going to go down to the article just below the header, and I'm going to give it an ID of content. So if I save this and then go back into my browser and refresh the page, now when I click on this, it's going to jump right down to the content region. So skip navigation links are definitely something you want to have on your site, especially if you have a lot of complicated navigation at the top of the page. Now, the next thing you want to do to ensure accessibility is using the title attribute. So we have the global title attribute that can go on multiple elements. In this case, I'm obviously referring to it on links. And essentially what it does is it just passes along some additional information about the links. Now, a lot of browsers will show these as tooltips if you hover over them, but the real benefit to them is obviously passing along additional information to people using screen readers and other assistive devices. They're really easy to do. As a matter of fact, we just did one. So I'm going to go down to our menu here in the code, and I'm just going to add a few titles here. Now, they should be descriptive, but you don't want to go too long with the description. So for index, I'm just going to give it a title attribute of homepage. So that's fairly descriptive, but it's not a really long sentence. You don't want to be reading out a lot of stuff here. For products, I'm just going to go ahead and say our products. For blog, I'm going to go ahead and give it a title of read our blog. I generally try to keep it 4 words or under, but that's totally my preference. You can do kind of whatever you want to. I'm going to do company info for about, and then finally for contact, I'll do contact us. And I'll go ahead and save that. Now, visibly, we're not really going to see a whole lot here. If I highlight over these now, you can see we get this little tooltip, but that's not really what they're for. They're more for passing along additional information about the links themselves. Now, the next thing, it sounds kind of obvious, but make your link content meaningful. When screen readers read out a link, they read out the link itself, and they say link, and then they read the contents of the link. If the contents of the link consist of something like click here, what does that actually mean? You want to make sure that the text within the link actually says something. For example, notice that if I go a little bit further down the page here, I have the infamous click here text, and I also have this really long URL. If you include really long URLs like that within an active link, remember, screen readers are going to read out that whole thing, and it's going to be rather annoying. So I'm going to go back and change those two things. So I'm going to go back in the code. I'm going to scroll all the way down through the code, and I'm going to replace the whole click here text. I don't like that. I'm going to highlight that, and I'm going to give it a little bit more descriptive text. I'm going to say explore the WAI ARIA specification, and I just want that inside my link. When I go down here and I see this really long URL written out, I don't want that either. So what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to get rid of the URL. I'm going to get rid of the word at, and then I'm just going to take the anchor element and I'm going to surround the text that it's referencing. Absolutely nothing wrong with that. So now, instead of having to write out that entirely long URL and then have screen readers read that, now if we go back and take a look at this page, we can see that these links are much more descriptive. We're not actually going to do this as part of the exercise, but I do want to point out that links should also be keyboard accessible. What that means is if you guys are building applications, a lot of times people will create a link on the page that's not even really a link. They'll have like a div tag or a paragraph or a list item that they make clickable through JavaScript. When people are using or browsing your web page without a mouse, there are certain people out there who have disabilities that can't use a mouse or just maybe using a user agent that isn't mouse capable. In those cases, a lot of times they'll use the tab key to tab through the links on your page. Well, if you're creating those links through JavaScript or having those empty links that are only triggered through JavaScript, then those particular types of links don't receive that focus. So you need to keep that in mind and make sure that all the links on your page are keyboard accessible and people can tab into them. Finally, I want to talk about the ARIA landmark roles. It's like an accessible micro format that passes along more information about particular page regions. Now, this is especially helpful for navigation because there are certain user agents out there that will allow you to navigate to a particular region. If you could set it up, for example, as a preference to always go to the main region so that you're just instantly reading content. Others, you might say, okay, take me to the navigation. And by applying these role attributes to these regions, you're not only passing along more semantic information about your page, but you're also helping out these assisted devices. There's way more about the WAI ARIA landmark roles than I can cover right here. So I've given you links to the specification, and I've also given you some general links to the pages on links and hypertext for the Web AIMS Accessibility Initiative page, so you can learn a lot more about navigation and accessibility there as well. So before we go, let's just go ahead and take care of those landmark roles. There are certain landmark roles that you want to use. There's banner, there's navigation, there's main. Those are the ones that we're going to be using for this particular example. Now, there are more out there, so be sure to check out the specification. So I'm going to go into header, and for header, I'm just going to go ahead and give it a role attribute of banner. Now, I'm going to go down to my navigation here, which in this case is in my UL tag, and I'm just going to go ahead and give it a role of navigation. And then finally, I'm going to go down to the article, and I'm going to go ahead and give it a role as well of main. Now, I know this was sort of a long movie, but actually those are just some of the basic things that you can do to make your links more accessible. Now, if you want to find out a little bit more about it, be sure to check out the link on this page down here at the bottom to the Web AIMS page on links and hypertext. There's a lot of good information there. And don't forget to go ahead and read the WAI ARIA specification as well. There's information on all those roles that we covered, as well as a lot more information about how to make your pages more accessible.